Talent can't be taught, but it can be awakened and nurtured. On that note, a wonderful and a pleasant morning to one and all present here. Welcome to day 3, session 2 of Women of Code Summit 2022. I'm delighted to host our eminent speaker of the session, Mr. Jain, a research intern at Brown Visual Computing. He is also an undergraduate researcher at Prague IIITT. Not only that, a software engineering intern at Google, he has made significant contributions to major research projects in domains such as computing and others. Here to share his valuable insights about research, the ultimate guide. Welcome you, sir.
Hi everyone, thanks Janini for the interview. So good morning, hope you're doing great. So today we'll be talking about research, and this presentation would be helpful for you if you have seen other people do research, you want to know what it is about, but you've never done it yourself. Um, it would be most helpful for you if you are an undergrad. Some of these tips would apply if you're later in your career and studies as well, but this is focused on undergrads majorly. So sit back, relax. This would be a very chilled out presentation. There would be no we won't be talking about stuff that doesn't make sense, is complicated and so on. So let's begin. Um, so I'll begin by quickly giving you an overview of my own research experiences, because I'll be going back to these all the time when I have to look for examples. So there are three research labs that I work with. One of them is the Robotics Research Center at IIIT Hyderabad. The second one is Precog at IIIT Hyderabad, and the third one is Brown University's Visual Computing Department. So as you can see here, I joined these labs at different times during the second and third year of my undergrad studies. And these labs work on a variety of different topics. So from robotics to computational social sciences to computer vision. So these are aspects that I'll keep on referring to throughout this presentation. This presentation is going to be filled with random memes as well. So let's begin with what's research for you as an undergrad. So most of you would be thinking that it is related to doing something that hasn't ever been done before, that is kind of new. This is true in some respects, not always and not necessarily. So what a better definition according to me would be is research is about looking for gaps in current work and filling them. Now you can fill them with something that's completely new and has never been done before, or you can fill them with something that somebody else has used someplace else, but nobody has thought of that it can be used in this context. So um, again, what that means is that it isn't as hard as it seems. It's not true that you have no place to look for answers because you're moving in uncharted territory. There are answers here and there. People before you would have faced similar problems and solved them. You just have to figure out which of those answers to pick and plug in um, into the gap that you're working on. So that's a sort of a better or a more realistic definition of what research is about. Um, and it, yes, as this tweet says, it also involves a lot of annoying tasks. For example, reading a lot of work and everything. We'll get to all of that in a moment. So the first question that would pop into your mind is why do it? Um, the simple reason for that is maybe intellectual curiosity. Maybe it interests you to solve problems that aren't sort of solvable just by like googling them. The answer isn't already available on a Stack Overflow page. um, and it helps your resume, it helps build your resume. People really appreciate it if you do research, if you contribute to the field. It helps you with higher studies, it helps you figure out your interests. Do you want to do a master's in this area, do you want to go and for a PhD? And it helps you with those applications as well. People would have a ton of other reasons of why they do it. These are the ones that I could think of. A quick rundown of the kinds of research projects. This list is not exhaustive, but the first one here is the most obvious one, where you sort of use a new method to solve a problem. Now, this method could be completely new. Nobody has ever used this method before. Or it could be about the application of an existing method to a new problem that nobody thought of this in this way before. So this is what you probably already think of as research, but there are other kinds of projects as well. So the second one here, so these are research projects that offer better insights into a particular area or into a particular field, and they sort of analyze data. For example, there could be a project that studies the effect of music on human behavior, on human psychology, for example. Now they aren't sort of solving a problem or giving a solution, but they are telling you how the human mind works, for example. um, so this understanding is something that's really important as well, because it helps us figure out what more we can do in this area, how we can understand things better, or maybe how we can solve potential problems. So these kinds of projects typically involve user studies or lots of data analytics and those kinds of areas. The third one could be research projects that define a new problem. So they go and tell you that, hey, this is a problem that a lot of us are facing. This is something that probably worth looking into. They formalize it, define it. What would be an appropriate solution to this? What all properties do you want out of that solution, and so on. They often release data sets that are related to that problem. So these data sets could help others solve that problem who actually want to propose a solution. These data sets could help you train models if you're working in the machine learning space and working and thinking of working on that problem. Then there are projects that survey a field. So they look maybe 5 years back or 10 years back and look at all the work that's been done in a particular area, and they sort of condense it, summarize it, that these are the areas where we've made progress, these are the areas where we haven't. These are the kinds of methods that seem to work usually in this field. So maybe somebody can go ahead and apply these methods to these areas as well, and so on. So again, this list is not exhaustive, but these are some research projects that people work on. I'll give you an example. So this is a research project that I was involved in. Again, you do not need to understand what's written on screen. I know that those words may not be familiar. They are very domain specific. You do not need to know them. But this project is the one that falls in two of those categories. So the first one. So this project proposes a new method to solve a particular problem. That problem is called self-supervised canonicalization of 3D posts, but that's not important. So it proposes a new method to solve that problem. That problem has already been tackled before, but the project claims that the method it proposes is better in some respects, or maybe faster or easier or more accurate than existing methods. Um, and then it also introduces a new related problem. So it says that what you were doing for full shapes also needs to be done for partial shapes, and these are the reasons why this problem is interesting, why this problem is different, why we need a different solution for this, and so on. So this project sort of is an example that falls into two of those categories. So at this point, we'll shift gears and go into what all does a research project include. So here's a quick list. So first of all, you have to figure out what research area you want to work in. You have to become familiar with that area, and you have to get into a research group that works in that area, because nobody works on research projects alone. It's just too hard to do it alone. Um, then you have to read lots of existing work in that area, because you need to figure out where those gaps are that you plan to fill. So you need to know what work has been done. Then you have to pick a problem statement. You have to find the gap that you want to work on. Now, this step usually involves some more dimensions. I'll come to that in a moment. Then after that, you maybe propose a solution. You work on your solution, you experiment with it. Does it work, does it not work? Or if your project isn't about solving a problem, it's about understanding data, then you run those experiments, you make observations, and so on. Then you would realize that your project is going in 50 different directions. You need to narrow it down to one. So you scope the project, you figure out what are the most important aspects to focus on. And this is probably the hardest part of working on a research project. So coming up with a solution is easy, but figuring out which of those three solutions to go ahead with is sort of the hard part. Then research often involves meeting a lot of people, discussing your problem, your project with a lot of other individuals. So presenting your work is something that's a very important skill that you'll pick up if you work on a research project. So this is something that you'll be writing lots of documents about your research. You'll be preparing slides, you'll be giving talks even before you've published it, even before your thing actually works. And then you'll be getting advice from a lot of people, figuring out how to incorporate that advice. And then finally, you end up actually writing and submitting a paper. And after that, you can go back and pick up those three, the two of those three things that you left out and work on them as extensions to your project. So I know that was quite a lot. So we'll walk through each of those different phases. And as an example, I'll take one of the projects that I was involved with. So this project was of the second kind, that we weren't solving a problem. We were just analyzing data, figuring out trends, and sort of presenting them. So a very quick walkthrough of what the project is about. So this project discusses or sort of characterizes the Indian social media platform that's called Koo. It is a platform that's similar in Twitter to functionality. You may or may not have heard of it. So what this project does is that it characterizes how users behave on that platform. What are the user connections? What are the topics that are being discussed, and so on. So uh, all of these problems are very well understood for Twitter because Twitter is older, larger, a very well researched platform. However, we were doing it for Koo, which is a new platform, so nobody before us had studied Koo in a lot of detail. So that's what we were doing. So let's go over the same points again. Out of these, I'll skip the first one, which was finding your research area and getting into a research group, because that's something that we'll talk about later. So exploring the area and picking a problem. So how did we end up picking this problem? So there were times in the past when sort of spiked in popularity. There were certain events that got popular in Ku, and there were reasons because of which Ku got popular in mainstream media as well. And that's when, because we usually work on Twitter and we usually work on social media related problems, so we came across that. Okay, so this new platform is getting popular, let's study it. So that's how we sort of explored this area and sort of picked that we want to study who. After that, the next step is reading lots of existing work. So everything that I mentioned before has sort of been done on Twitter. That doesn't mean that we can simply copy paste what they did to our use case. We are bound to have differences. We are bound to face new problems that they didn't face, that we have to figure out. However, because we read a lot of work, a lot of research papers that do these same things with Twitter. So they analyze what kind of discourse happens on Twitter. They analyze what are people talking about, who are these people who are talking about particular topics, and so on. So we could look at those research papers and say, okay, these are the things that people study. So these are the same things that we can study on Ku. And these are sort of the approaches that they use to study these things. And we can use similar approaches with maybe certain changes that we would need. So that's how reading existing work helps you. And that's why it is one of the most important steps in this process. The third one is running experiments and making modifications. So this is probably the longest phase of a research project. So here we were trying out different statistical methods, maybe some machine learning methods to analyze the tons of data that we had collected out of that platform. We were looking for trends. We were looking for insights on how maybe Koo differs from Twitter. And as we were doing this, we were also figuring out the questions that we want to answer. So this is where research projects kind of differ. In some cases, you know the question or the problem that you're solving beforehand. In our case, we did not. We were looking at the data and looking at the kinds of questions that data can answer, and based on that, forming hypothesis. So a hypothesis is um, it is in a rough sense sort of an idea or an intuition that you have that you want to understand in more detail. You want to see if your intuition or that idea or your guess is correct or not, and you want to understand why is it correct and why it isn't correct. And that's when you look at the data, run the experiments, and figure out if what you were thinking of was correct. So in our case, we didn't have an hypothesis to begin with. We were sort of looking at the data, figuring out that maybe this is something that sounds interesting. Let's look at this in more detail. So that's how we were structuring this project, and then scoping the project. So there were lots of directions where we could have gone. in which we could have gone. For example, we could have gone for a general characterization of the platform. We could have maybe studied political content on the platform. Maybe we could have studied spam or hateful content on the platform. Maybe we could have studied different topics that people use the platform for. Maybe we could have studied differences between the platform and Twitter and so on. Out of these, we picked the first one, and that's how we decided that this is the area that's most interesting. In To us, this is the area where we have the most results, and so let's go with this area. So we went with the general characterization of the platform. Then after that, we presented our work to lots of external collaborators, so people outside our research lab, people who work in this area, who the same people who studied Twitter before. We reached out to them. We gave them presentations of this is what we have. This is where we are planning to go. Do you have any suggestions? Then usually at this stage, the suggestions that come to you are wild and random. People because they're looking at the problem the first time, they would say what like they would give you very broad, very generic suggestions that come to their mind, and it is again your job to narrow down those suggestions, to polish them, pick the ones that you want to actually incorporate, and so on. And after that, writing and submitting a paper is sort of a skill in itself that you would again develop if you ever choose to work on a research project. um, Here, if you look at the sections that are actually in the paper that are mentioned at the right towards the right of the slide, you'll realize that they sort of exactly correspond with what we've been discussing. So the second section is discussing related work that's already been done. The third section is methods and experiments. The fourth one is results. So these are related to the experiment part of the project. And then the second to last one is limitations and future work. So this is when you scope out, you cut down on what you're working on, what you want to focus on. So the things that you aren't able to answer, you mention that in your paper, that these are the things that we didn't focus on. Maybe somebody else can, and so on. So the sections sort of exactly correspond with what with how your research project would go. So that was it for my journey of how this project went. But remember, we skipped the first point, which is picking your area and getting into a research group. So now let's get into this in more detail, because in my understanding, this is the area that would be the most daunting for anybody who's trying to get into research for the first time. So the way I would recommend the first year or a second year student, if you are one, if you're beginning with your undergrad studies, to go about this is explore different fields. So do this using university courses. I mean, most universities offer options or elective courses. So pick the diverse ones. Pick maybe some area sounds interesting. Pick a course in that area just to figure out what that area is about. If you feel that your university isn't giving you enough exposure, look online, look outside, find online courses, find online projects. So what you're just trying to do is get a sense of different areas. So maybe you want to work in computer vision, maybe you want to work in machine learning, maybe you want to work in databases, maybe you want to work in data analytics. So just look at these areas, see if any one of them sort of makes more sense, is more interesting. Um, does do problems in that area make sense, and so on. Then slowly, as you get used to that area, then start reading new research in that area. Look for research papers. Most advanced courses would sort of mention research papers as they go about the course curriculum. So actually go ahead and read those papers. um, Figure out what are the new problems in that area that people are trying to solve. Again, do those problems make sense to you? Does it seem worthwhile to you, that you invest your time in solving that problem? And do the methods make sense? Are you able to understand what's going on, understand the intuition behind it? Do you picture yourself working on those methods, on those kinds of tasks, maybe that particular kind of code, or that those particular kinds of things that you have to do to solve it? Do you picture yourself working on those things and not falling asleep, for example? um, Again, a sort of a warning that you won't find one particular area that you absolutely love. It almost never happens. You'll always be confused. Maybe nothing sounds interesting. Maybe you don't understand it well enough to get into it. It won't be love at first sight. So you sort of have to pick one and go with it. There's no other way about it. You may be wrong, but that's perfectly fine because there's still your undergrad. You can explore multiple areas. You can switch between areas. No one's stopping you from doing that. If you see my own journey, I work in three different labs in two broad areas. So computational social sciences and computer vision. Um, because again, I couldn't figure out which one to pick, so I just chose to explore both, and that's perfectly all right. Then another question is, do you necessarily want to go with the areas that are sort of buzzwords? So machine learning is a buzzword these days. Virtual reality is a buzzword these days. Do you want to necessarily go into those areas? I would say that because more work is being done in these areas, they are sort of more happening, more exciting. So if that's something that you like, then yes, sure, go ahead. However, if that's not something that you're excited about and you want to work on something that's sort of more fundamental, more maybe databases or systems, for example, then again, those are valid choices as well. People do work on those things as well. It might be slightly harder for you because a lot more work has been done in these areas because they've been there longer. So you might have to maybe brush up with a lot more literature if you're exploring areas such as systems or databases, as compared to a field that is sort of new and growing right now. So that's all that I had to say about picking your area. The next step would be for you would be getting into a research group. So for this, my first advice is have a good profile, have really strong fundamentals. Again, this involves grades, this involves concepts, this involves your resume, because if you're going to go to a research group, go to a professor and tell them um, that you want to work on a particular problem, then they are going to look at what you've done in the past, what work you've done in the past. They are going to use your resume to judge your resolve to work on problems, your problem solving abilities, and so on. So having a good profile is important. You can choose how you want to make a good profile. Maybe you like one particular kinds of problem, so again, build your profile based on that. Maybe you like working in open source, build your profile based on that. Maybe you get good grades, so build your profile based on that. Maybe you like competitive programming, build your profile based on that. But have something that you can show that as sort of a proof of your own work, that um, this is something that I like and I'm really good at it. So like, give me the opportunity to explore another field and I'll do my best, sort of. So that's what you're presenting to them when you have a good profile. So again, people have the sort of conception that getting into research groups is really hard. Professors are really picky. That is true for some to some extent, because they're looking for effectively a colleague. They're looking for somebody they'll be working with for a year, or for more than a year. They're looking for somebody they'll be meeting every week. So they want to make sure that that person is something that they enjoy working with themselves. Which is why this might seem a little bit hard, that processes are selective and so on. However, I mean, if you know the right way to do it, you will probably get in somewhere. So you don't have to sort of be intimidated by this fact. We'll also discuss how to apply, where to apply, and so on in a moment. Then again, the best starting points are always professors at your own university. The best way to approach them is to take their courses, to engage with them in course projects. So discuss your course project with them, do a course project that's more challenging than what other people usually do. That's why you'll get them to notice you, and that's important. So if they know your name, if they know that you've done good work, then they are a lot more likely to have to like let you work with them. So your own university professors are sort of the best starting point, and then later on you can maybe approach professors elsewhere as well. Um, but if you feel that at your university you do not have the opportunity, or maybe people don't generally work with professors, or they aren't so keen and so on, then yes, you directly skip to looking for people on elsewhere that you can work with. Now, how you go about looking for that, we'll come to in a moment. But let's say you have identified a group that you want to work with, and that group is at some other university. Now, what do you do? Now you read their works. You sort of try to make sense of what are the kinds of problems that they usually tackle. So even if two groups are working in a field, they'll almost always be working on slightly different problems, right? So it would be that this one group tends to focus on one particular kind of problems and so on. So you have to figure that out. You have to go through their top most recent 3 4 papers to figure this out, and then once you've done this, you would have a pretty good idea of what are the kinds of problems you will be working on if you go and work with them. And then if you have this idea, so then is a good time to apply, because if when you reach out to them, maybe you email the professor, maybe they have an application form. In that, they'll probably ask you to talk about what you want to work on. So there, the more detailed an answer you give, the better it is for you. So having a good idea of what that group works on, or maybe where you can fit in that group, would sort of really help your application, so to speak. So those are sort of the steps in applying. Now, how do you find these other research groups at other places? For that, the simplest solution is look for research programs. So off the top of my head, I can name maybe my tax, which is a research program that involves several different universities in Canada. And yeah, so you sort of centrally apply to my tax, and they match you to different universities and different professors on their own and so on. So that's one. Then several universities in the US also run their own research programs. For example, I know that several departments at CMU, Carnegie Mellon, have their own research programs. Several universities in the Europe do as well. So there's DAAD. I think it's something specific to India, but there's DAAD for Germany. There's EPFL. Some are at EPFL uh, in Switzerland and so on. So there are tons of these research programs. These are actually meant for people like you, for undergrad in their maybe second or third years, who haven't ever done research before, who want to get into research. They are meant for you. So you do not have to feel intimidated while applying to them. Maybe you do not have any prior research experience. How do I even fill this application? You do not have to feel that way, because everybody applying to them is in a similar position as you. So I gave some names, but look online, you will find lists of these programs, and apply to all of them. Like if you don't apply, you'll never get in. So the first step is to apply to all of them, to not be afraid and apply. So research programs, applying to these well-defined research programs is the easier or the more convenient way. However, they don't always work out. Maybe the group that you want to work with doesn't have a research program, or maybe you didn't get into the research program that you want to, because they also tend to be competitive in the sense that a lot of people are applying to it. So the second aspect is cold emailing, or simply emailing professors. So what you do is that you go online, you search for universities. So say you know the name of a university, you pick that. So let's say you pick Brown University. You look at their faculty lists, and then you find the names of professors that are working in areas that you like. Then you go and look for that professor online. You find their work. You find it interesting. You want to apply to them. So you simply find their email online, and then you email them. So um, people email hundreds and maybe even more professors um, every year, and that is why it's called cold emailing, because you are sort of emailing people in bulk. Um, so that's another way to get into research programs, directly emailing or directly interacting with professors. Maybe in that email you can discuss their work with them, discuss your own work with them, discuss that these are the kinds of problems that you want to solve, and so on. So that's sort of the second way. Now here, what's the best way to go about actually emailing professors? Does it make sense to email 500? Because then you'll not be able to customize your email, right? You'll be sort of sending the same email to hundreds of professors in bulk. Is that a good idea, or should you email a very small number of professors, but you should spend a lot of time in that email? Uh, Again, these you can maybe try out both approaches. You can focus on a certain set of professors and then bulk email the rest. Although bulk emailing isn't ever considered good because you're sort of spamming other people. So I don't think it's the best way to go about it. Maybe focusing your email is on certain sets of professors is a better idea. Um, so yep, so that's the second way to go about approaching people and applying to their research groups. And then this is something that I'd like to highlight, that one very important resource for you in this would be Twitter. Um, so if you aren't on Twitter, I'd recommend that you go and join Twitter and follow other students, follow other people that you know are in the research field, follow professors, follow research groups. And I mean, Twitter would automatically start suggesting you people to follow once you follow a small set of the right people. Um, and what that would so the way that would help you is it would let you know of opportunities, because because professors tend to be very active on Twitter. A lot of professors tend to be very active on Twitter, and they would post there about openings in their research labs, about the kinds of problems that they're working on, about their new research projects, and so on. So that would help you find more people, connect with different professors, or simply figure out what they're working on, or maybe get notified of an opportunity in a particular research group, and so on. So that's sort of one quick tip, that Twitter can help you in your sort search for a research group, so to speak. So so that was all that I had about getting into a research group. And after you're done with that, you can actually start working on a problem. So again, this is the final slide that I have about what you should do, what should be your plan. So again, if you are in the early years of your undergrad, maybe your first year, um, don't worry a lot about it right now. Focus on fundamentals. Focus on being able to write code, or focus on just the basics of your field. um, Start building your profile. Make sure that you give time to whatever is necessary for your profile to shine. If that's coursework, if that's extra projects, if that's open source, that's something for you to decide. But um, start building that profile, that maybe that you're sort of proud of when you're presenting it to somebody. So focus on fundamentals and have a great profile if you are just beginning, or if you are in the first year, for example. Then after that, as after you feel that you have sort of covered your bases when it comes to the fundamentals of your field, start taking diverse courses, start exploring research areas outside. After that, like go back to the steps that we mentioned, and finally pick a research area. And after that, after you've picked the research area, explore it for a little while, and after that, you can try getting into a research group. So maybe your second year, the summers after your second year, is when you want to maybe work on your first research project. So make sure that you're applied by that time, and after that you can see how that goes. See if you want to continue into research, then spend um, like you can work on research along with your semester, so you can work on it more in your third years, your fourth years, the summers, then, and so on. And yeah, so it would happen possibly that the field that you picked will not work for you at all. And if that happens, you do not have to worry about it, because again, undergrad is a very early time. This is the time that you can explore and make mistakes. So if that happens, simply repeat this process. Pick a different area this time. Be more careful, um, and then see how this one goes. So that's all that I had. So again, thank you for listening. I hope that this presentation helped you. Thank you.
Yeah, it was really an amazing session. Like you have taken about a complete journey of research from starting to the end, and how they need to approach and how they need to see the research gaps and how to implement in their research papers. So I have some list of questions to ask you. So may I start?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So How about the journals, sir? Like from if I am an undergraduate student, so how I need to approach a journal or a conference first?
Sorry, could you repeat that? I couldn't quite catch it.
Like we have different types of journals, like normal indexing journals and UGC journals, Scopus, SCI. So as an undergraduate, in what way we need to approach them? Like,
So the way this works is that after you're nearing the completion of your research project, like maybe at the time where you feel that, so this is where I have some result. So that's when you start thinking about where do I want to publish this work. So that's when the question of journals comes in. Um, at that point, you'll start looking at which conferences, which journals are relevant to your area, in that which conferences with journals publish the kind of work that you do. Some tend to look more towards papers that solve a particular problem. Some tend to look more towards um, simply papers that analyze a problem and so on. So again, that is something that you do not have to immediately worry about as an undergrad. Your professors or other people in your group who have experience would be better at guiding you for where to publish your work or which journals to submit to, which conferences to submit to. So I mean that's a step that would come later. That's a step that others would be there to help you and so on. Don't worry a lot about it right now.
yeah, okay, thank you, sir. So we have a question here. Do
Um,
you
I
think do you think companies will hire more research professional as there has been a continuous demand for new technology in different industries?
Yes. So, if you'll see, I mean, open up the job listing page of any company that you like. Maybe look at careers.google.com or careers.facebook.com. They'll have separate listings for software engineers, and then they'll have separate listings for research scientists, research engineers, applied scientists, and so on. So these are fields that some of them, again, go on to require a PhD, some of them require a master's, some of them don't require degrees, but they expect some sort of research experience. And that's because um, today, research isn't just done by universities or research groups at universities. Industries or companies engage a lot with research these days. So some of the best breakthroughs these days often come from companies like Google or Facebook. They have separate branches, like completely separate branches working on research full time. So yes, you are right that there's a huge demand for people who have research experience or who even have masters or PhD degrees in the industry as well. So in companies.
Yeah, it's really good, sir. And how about the scope of research in India? Like we know about the foreign countries, they used to have a great research there, an advanced level of research. So what about research in India?
So uh, so I so the way I'd like to answer that question is one. Research in India is also growing. Again, I am not very used. I cannot give you statistics, for example, because I don't know them myself. I'm not that familiar with with all different fields. But at least in my area, a ton of work is being done on at least the areas that I work on in India as well. So this would involve research labs um, from like a lot of different universities, as well as research divisions of companies. For example, Microsoft Research has a presence in India. Google Research recently came to India about a year or so back. They've begun their own programs. For example, Microsoft Research has a very famous pre-doctoral program. So does Google Research now. So research in India in at least these fields is growing at an amazing pace. And the second comment that I have is that you do not have to worry about the country that you're situated in. As I said, you can approach people outside if you feel that your area isn't being explored enough in India, then you can find research groups outside and you can approach and work with them virtually, for example. What should be the first step for someone to get into the research industry? So Um, by research industry, I'm assuming you're looking for research jobs. If that's the case, then um, having a good research profile helps. So maybe if you've worked on a couple of research projects during your studies, mm, like it could be your undergrad, it could be a master. If you're doing a PhD, then obviously you would have a lot more research experience. So a good way to do that is to work on research problems during your studies, maybe let's say during our undergrad. So that way, while you're applying to that job, you can show them that you already know how to work on research problems. You already have that aptitude and that experience, and that would increase your chances of getting in. Um, I hope that answered that question.
Yeah. Okay, sir. And as a fresher, like as an initiator in doing going inside a research, so what kind of paper would be preferable for them to start with?
Could you repeat that? What kinds of what is preferable?
For example, we have different kinds of research papers like review papers and normal research papers and comparative study and experimental study. So, what would be
Hmm.
the first paper so that it will be easy for them to do it in an initial stage?
Okay, um, so let's begin with when you're reading a paper. You're not working on a problem of your own. So let's begin there. So there, I think the kinds of papers. So again, answer to this would depend a lot on the kind of area that you're working on, or the kind of problem that you're trying to solve. But if you're just reading a paper and trying to figure out how to work in a field, then summary papers or survey papers are a good idea, a good first place to start, because they condense a lot of papers into a single one. Um, they are easier to read. They give a lot of different perspectives on a problem, because they are sort of summarizing a lot of different papers. If you are asking about what kind of paper that you should go about writing, first, again, that depends on completely depends on the kind of problem that you want to solve. So if you find a particular problem statement interesting, and if I want to find a new way to solve that problem statement, then you will end up writing that kind of a paper. If you just find a field that's interesting, and you see that this field has made significant progress, and maybe it's worthwhile to have a survey paper in this field, and there isn't one before, then you'll end up writing a survey paper. So you don't go about deciding the kind of paper, you go about deciding the kind of problem that you want to solve, and the kind of paper automatically follows.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. Thank you. And which domain is
Um,
preferable for doing a research, sir? Like,
so which domain, or there's another question about which research topic. There's no one preferable domain. You'll have to find something that works for you. You'll have to find something that's interesting for you. What's interesting for me may not be interesting for you. I'm sorry, I cannot give a better answer for that. But yes, you will have to do your own your own homework sort of, and explore different areas, and then find the one that sort of clicks with you.
yeah, okay, sir. And thank you so much. And I think that is a similar question. So, can you suggest some research topic to start with? Like, you have already answered to it. And thank you so much for setting up the stage with a lot of
Hmm.
insights and valuable points, sir. And we are very happy to have you now and to talk about the research. I hope everybody would have got a lot of valuable insights, like how to start a research and how to convert them into a paper and how to publish it out. And thank you so much again, sir.
Sure. Thanks a lot for hosting me. Hope this was helpful. Thank you.